Welcome to the Money Mike Syndicated Radio Podcast. How we doing? How we doing? We got a special one. How to coach a point guard. How to coach a point guard in the WNBA. That's a generational talent. And how to coach a number one draft pick. We'll answer these questions and more today on the Money Mike Syndicated Radio Podcast. So we start out how to coach a point guard. Man, oh man, does that get to the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to do here? I mean, I'm just asking, right? Because if that gets to the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to do, then we got something good, right? Because everybody wants to know how to coach a point guard. What do you do? Where do you do it? And how do you do it, right? So let's go through the basics of if you looked up how to coach a point guard, what is it going to talk about? You're going to talk about how to develop a strong handle, focus on your passing, definitely know your teammates, listen to your coach, create drills, record practice, spend time on ball handling and practicing, right? So, I mean, that gives you the basic fundamentals of how to coach a point guard. Now, why am I going over this? As you already know, we just a day yesterday with Christie sides being taken out of the box, moving forward in a different direction with the Indiana Fever, right? So you got Christy Side sitting there, and she's no longer the Fever coach. And why? Why? My. Because you got to know how to coach a point guard. And if you don't know how to coach a point guard, you're going to end up with some bad taste in your mouth. And then it comes to an end where people start. That's what happens, right? Because you're going around and round and round, you're spinning yourself around, right? So not only do you got to coach a point guard, that's pretty easy. But we're gonna get into some stuff here. We're gonna open up the table, open up the books a little bit, and we're gonna talk to you about how to coach a point guard that's a generational talent, right? Because you got to decide what you got. Do I got a standard point guard or do I got a generational talent? So you got Caitlin Clark's a generational talent, right? You don't put a governor on the car. You don't throttle down the car. You get a point guard that comes in with that much knowledge, that much intensity, that much love for the game. You got to turn them loose, right? Because the only way you get a breakthrough as a coach, this is the only way, is when they fail. Okay. You got to let them fail. You can't come in and say, "Welcome to the WNBA." And this is Christie side. So I'm kind of giving you guys this both ways because Christie sides went in there and just didn't understand how to coach a generational talent, right? You're getting into your coaching philosophy and you're so high on the coaching philosophy, you forget how to coach a player that's coming in. So when you get a player that's generational talent, it's really not about basketball, right? You're going to help them, but they've been doing basketball all their life, and that's how they got to this stage, right? So now you got to look at it and say, well, how do I do this? But not only you got to do that, okay, how do I coach a player that's the number one draft pick, right? Because this player is the number one pick, right? So in Indiana Fever, you got back to back, right? You got Boston and you got Caitlin Clark. And I told you when you get another pick was Nelissa Smith coming out of LSU. So what do you got? What do you got? You got as in the grassroots game, you got to translate, right? You have to be able to do translations. What do I mean by translation? You got to call those coaches and you got to find out what worked good, what didn't work. Here's the problems I'm having today. What can we do? Okay, to get this thing turned around, right? Because the player and you are not in an agreement, right? This is how it breaks down. The player and the coach are not in agreement. You got to figure out how do I turn this player around, right? And a lot of times, I can tell you, it's like I talked to you a little bit yesterday about Phil Jackson. It's like being a Zen master, man. You got to get into the mind and find out how they click, right? And the only time they're going to listen is when they fail. So if they're succeeding, you got to let them just keep on running down and succeeding. Why do I say that? I'll take you to Paul Westhead, and Magic Johnson, right? So what happened in that situation? Magic came out of Michigan State. He won a national championship. Paul Westhead wanted to get into their offense. What do we do? How do we do it? This is how we play basketball. Nice and slow. Okay. So when you get this generational talent who's going to win you a championship, okay, you can't move back and start correcting or telling the player what to do. You got to let him have freedom. Freedom has got him to the number one pick, right? So you got a generational talent who's the number one pick. How do you do this? How do you get this one done? And the number one thing I'll give you another example here. When you get into grassroots and you're gonna be dealing with players, you gotta have people to do translations, right? Every player in the WNBA, okay, this is a part of coaching. You gotta get to the translation. What do I mean? Brad Stevens of the Boston Celtics came out of Butler, excellent basketball coach, but he couldn't get it done. Okay, so what did Boston do? They had to hire another coach, okay, that came in, wasn't as popularized, wasn't had all the accolades, but he understands translations, and the Boston Celtics won the championship, right? So everybody's got a translation person. This way it works, folks in the grassroots, because all these guys are trainers, and we're all in the box, and we got players at different schools. So for me, I could have a player over there. I tell you about Gina Johnson, got injured, should have been in the WNBA, UOP. Took the OP, got Lynn Roberts to get up there to Utah, got the Utah job, right? That came out of our program, Showtime Hoops. What did Lynn Roberts do? If you get one, go get another. She took Erica Bean, right? Erica Bean comes out of Sacramento too. Is starting point guard for Utah, right? So you build this regimen, okay, a resume of point guards. How do you do it? Who else did I had? Jasmine played for Washington University. Great point guard, should have played in the WNBA, right? So you get these players, and you got to know how do you handle them, and you got to handle them differently. Now, here's the toughest thing about coaching and coaching Hall of Fame talent, right? Because you're in trouble now. You got a player who's coming out of the grassroots, been in basketball all her life, has been coached up all her life, so her IQ's off the chart, right? So now you got to put this thing back together, and you got to say, okay, I got Caitlin Clark, and I'm really saying, how do you coach Caitlin Clark? Let's just say, how do you coach a player like Caitlin Clark? I need the translations person, number one, because I'm gonna spend about an hour a day with that person every day, because I need that person to translate what I'm saying. It's not resonating between the coach and the player. That's the thing, especially in women's basketball, because when you coach women, you can do something on day one. They're gonna hold it against you for the next 10 years. I didn't like the way you said this. I didn't like the way you said that, and they shut down. So what do you got? You got Christie Size trying to coach generational talent and trying to be buddy buddy. No, can't do it. Won't work. Never will. Never has. Right? Because in the midst of you being buddy buddy, and here's what happened to Christy Sides. You're in there buddy buddy, and you start out with Lynn Dunn. You got a 4-year plan, so you're thinking in the back of your mind all day long. I'm good for 4 years. I got 4 years. I'll make $2 million. Great. Not so fast, right? Because once the Indiana Fever realized, okay, we got a generational talent. What does that tell you? That's above Lynn Dunn's head. That's going to be above Christie's Side's head. Okay, that's going to be above all the president. Everybody got in this Indiana building, right? Because you hear how they say with the Indiana Fever, they're working right next door. So all they did, I mean, Kelly, I don't even think Kelly had to move her office. Let's be honest. Did you even have to move your office, Kelly? I mean, your office. I mean, unless you wanted a bigger office, right? Because you're already there and you're already in the building and you've evaluated everyone. Folks, these conversations didn't take place when Kelly was first hired as the president, right? These conversations have been going on since they hired Lynn Dunn. The Indiana Fever are a family. All right. So they love Lynn Dunn. Understandable. I thought Christy Sides, I tell you, should have took a college job. I would have bolted while the iron was hot, right? Because here's what Christy Sides could have done that would have been beneficial to her, because you had to know what type of results Kelly was expecting so you wouldn't get fired. You come off a season 216, you lead a team back to the playoffs, you go out there and you apply for those NCAA jobs. One, you're going to get a coaching raise. They're going to pay you more than $500,000, and you got a backbone to stand over. Now you got to dig yourself out of the mud, right? Because once you've been fired, it's labeled. But every coach gets fired. Now, there's two things you must understand with generational talent. They're going to get coaches fired. They're going to get coaches fired. I'm telling you, I've had about 4 players in my lifetime that get coaches fired. No matter what, it becomes the player is too good for anybody to coach him, right? So guess what? They keep firing. I mean, LeBron James going to get coaches fired. I mean, you go championship comeback, you get fired with LeBron, right? Because the translation is not there. Now, when did the Lakers start off 3-0? They got a coach with translations, right? So it gets back to what does Kelly expect? 'Cause this is a new coach, and everybody can say, you can talk about what does Kelly expect. You can talk about Stephanie White, this, that. That one still kind of is up in the air on me. I mean, they got a great relationship. It's Indiana, right? So they're keeping it all in the family, which they're supposed to do, right? But you got Kelly, who came in there and she had the job, left the job to take another job, went over to Vanderbilt, then you went over to Connecticut with better players than the Fever have. Deeper bench, the whole 9 yards. You didn't win it. Okay, that concerns me because now you're asking you to do something that you're not going to be able to do, right? So you gotta understand how do you do this, and when you get this, this is most important, folks. You got to be charismatic. You got to be charismatic. You gotta really be charismatic and you gotta be cocky, you gotta be a little narcissist. So if I replayed when Christie sides, when she got an opportunity and they drafted Kane and they had an opportunity to speak about Kane Clark, you know what I would have said? This is how you coach a generation player. Well, I don't know who we're gonna play in the WNBA championship, but we'll be glad to face anybody because I got Caden Clark, right? You get in there and you got a generational talent. Well, I don't know why you guys are talking about rookie of the year. This is the MVP of the league, right? So you gotta push that pressure back to the player. I don't know what you guys are talking about here in the media. Turnovers. I wish Caitlin get more turnovers, right? You push it back and you let them know what you want out of them, right? Because I think Caitlin can get 16 assists a game, right? I don't know why Caitlin's not getting 16, and you use the name. You put the pressure back on the player. This player is like a secretariat, okay? So when you get a secretariat, you don't know how hard the horse can run, right? Ronnie Turcotte, right? He pushed that horse. They used to say he pushed the horses so much, though, that the actual heart would burst, right? Because these players have got a big heart. And when they don't win, it's deflating. You got to pick them up like a hot air balloon, put them back together to go out there again. So, one thing you don't want to do, okay, is not be charismatic enough to back your player up, right? So here's the deal. You don't want to come in there and you got a generational player talking about a 4-year plan, right? No, you can't do that because at the end of the day, again, you got to be charismatic. Hey, you know what? What do you think you're going to do with the first round pick? I think we're going to win the WNBA championship this year, right now. We got what it takes. We have it, wasn't need. I know Caitlin Clark can do it. I believe Caitlin Clark can do it. And there ain't a doubt in your mind what any of you guys say whether or not Caitlin Clark can win a WNBA championship right in a rookie year right now. That's how you got to play the player, right? Because the player is listening to every word you say. Every word you say. Caitlin Clark has listened several times to every press conference that they have had with Christie sides, right? So Christie got herself in trouble. Christie jumped into bad habits. How you gonna tell number one draft pick you got bad habits, right? Come on, folks. Let's do this the right way, right? So you got to go in there and you gotta let the league know. Look, here's the deal. Okay, I got Caden Clark, number one draft pick, right? Generational player. Here's the deal. Rookie of the year. My player's the MVP, right? You go in there, I don't care what you guys think. I got the MVP. I got the best point guard in the league. You have to get into the order of operations of coaching a generational talent. You don't treat him the same. Okay, you don't treat him the same. This player may need a day off. I had Caitlin Clark, generational talent, much minutes that she ran. I'd give her days off in practice, right? Because you got to do that to separate that player by giving them days off. Now, when you give them the days off, what do? Okay, this is the WNBA grassroots here. We're getting to the WNBA. We're going to take this guard coming right out all the way up to the WNBA. You know what? I'm gonna get you some load management, but you know what? I need more production, right? Because you gotta take care of that player and separate them. Okay. One thing Red Auerbach did, he let Bill Russell, this is going way back, some of you might not know, others you will. He let Bill Russell read the paper during practice, right? Red Auerbach. Legendary. I mean, there's two great organizations in the NBA. That's the Lakers and Celtics, right? Players used to complain, right? They complain, oh, you're giving it treatment. Oh, you're doing this. You know what Red Auerbach told him, this generational talent? I got Bill Russell. He said, look, if you go out there and get 22 points, 22 rebounds, you can read the paper too, right? Because you're not doing what she's doing, right? So you got to get that in everybody's mind. that this player here is the next one, right? So now you got to break down the court because you got to come up with stuff that's important. And a lot of people, when you break down the court, in basketball, right? Because you got to take it to the science of the game. Let me break down this court. Okay, Caitlin, I got 4 corners here on the court. I need 4 assists out of each one of these corners, right? I need 4 assists out of each one of these corners. Now, you don't tell a player how to do it, right? Because they got to fail. So anything you're telling them before they fail, it's going right out their ear. They're not even listening to you, right? So Christie Sides is telling them, telling them, telling them, telling them. It's going right out the ear. It's like, come on, this is Bush League, right? You're having Bush League timeout. Because I tell you, if you go behind Lisa Bluter, that's going to be tough. Any WNBA player comes out of Iowa with Lisa Bluter, you're going to have a different mindset, right? Because there's so much IQ. If you come out of LSU with Kim Mulkey, right, you're going to have a different mindset, right? But you're going to be a fiery player. Mulkey produces fiery players, right? So you got to know, okay, that's another resume I got to match, okay? I got to match Lisa Bluter's career Hall of Fame. I got to match Don Staley's Hall of Fame, right? And I got to match Kim Mulkey's Hall of Fame, and I'm not a Hall of Famer, right? So here's the deal that goes down when you're coaching generational players. I mean, I'm just letting you know, folks. I mean, you get a number 1 draft pick, right? You got the number 1 draft pick, generational player. You cannot coach him the way you coach everyone else. Now, here's the hardest part that I see is going to be really tough is for the Fever next coach because it's going to have to be a coach who can do the translations. Gonna have to be the coach that can break down the court into the quarters, 4, 4, 4, 4. It's gonna have to be a coach that says, "Get me more turnovers, please." Okay, so when Caitlin gets turnovers, you don't go, "We need to bring the turnovers down." Okay, during the press conference, you go back, you fire back in the meeting. No, that's not enough turnovers. I need more because if Caitlin gets more turnovers, that means I get more assists. So you gotta get the media to understand how to deal with a generational player, or else they're going to fire bullets at you all day long. They're going to fire bullets at the players. Pretty soon, nobody wants to come to the press room anymore, right? Because it's not that way. But for Kelly, this is the NBA. You know what changed things about the NBA is the Indiana Fever knocking on the door, right? That's one thing. But the Indiana Pacers are knocking on the door, right? And don't get it confused, folks. In the NBA and the WNBA, let me just tell you how much the WNBA. Adam Silver knows it. Kelly knows it. How much it's tied. If you didn't have the WNBA, the NBA attendance would go down, right? Because some of these fans are season ticket holders to both teams, right? So basically, they live their lives and enjoy their lives around the Pacers and the Fever. There's nothing wrong with that, right? You've earned that. So you can't be on the 4-year plan. Skip that. That ain't going to ever work. Never going to work, right? Because you're gonna find yourself in situations where when you were supposed to win now, I listened to Christie Sides. I'm like, what are you doing? Right? What are you doing, Sides? You're talking about a 4-year plan when you got the team to win it right now. And you got to believe you can win, right? Because if you don't believe, right? If you don't believe and you got a generational talent coming out of grassroots, WNBA grassroots, and what is grassroots? So it's just pro basketball development. Where you pick players to bring them up to get in the league. That's it, period. Nothing else. And you train them, train them, train them. But everyone that's involved in that part of the business knows that player well. So when the coach says something to them, they're not going to understand the coach. Coach needs to call the translator, right? Because I spend hours of time on the phone with NCAA coaches, hours, right? Because the player's not getting this. And after they tell me that for hours, okay, coach, send me the film. Send me some film. Let me look at it. Because I got to not only take what the coach says, these are the translators, and whoever Caitlin Clark is, she has somebody she talks to after every game. There's one individual after every game that's going to evaluate what she did good, what she could have done. Now, when you're coaching that generational talent, you got to advance that talent to the next level, meaning that there's more in the tank. Because what will happen when you coach a generational talent, they're going to become complacent. They're so much better than everybody else. They're not going to want to do the work. They're just not going to want to do the work. So you got to keep pushing them. You got to keep holding them up. You got to keep making life where it's comfortable, but just a little uncomfortable, right? And you make them do team things that motivates this team. So you build it because it's a team bonding. because nobody knows Caitlin Clark. I mean, her whole life, you know what Caitlin's done? Play basketball. You know how many activities she missed out in her entire life because of basketball? There's a whole lot, right? So you're going to get a person that's going to go from A to B to B to C, and that's about it, right? And then when I get to D, it's my time. Don't call me, right? She's one of those players like Barry Sanders. But as a rookie, you must understand this: when you get coaches, this is the hard part, right? Because you're going to have to go get a coach, right? And I talk about being charismatic and understanding. But there's also one rule to that too. Here's the other rule I know: when you get a coach, okay, that's not on a Hall of Fame trajectory, right? It's hard to coach. If that coach hasn't been in the Hall of Fame and they don't understand where you're going, it's going to be hard to coach them, right? Let me give you an example of that. Okay, you got Peyton Manning, right? Because rookies do rookie stuff. Doesn't mean it's their whole career. It's just they did rookie stuff. Peyton Manning threw 28 interceptions. 28 interceptions his rookie year. You're talking about turnovers. Heck, that ain't even counting the fumbles, right? That's an astronomically high number. But they never gave up and they never decided to give up on Peyton Manning. They knew how great he was. So what happened? You had to have a Hall of Fame coach, right? You got to get a Hall of Fame coach to coach a player on a Hall of Fame trajectory, right? So what do? They bring in Tony Dungy, right? Because Tony Dungy is charismatic. Okay, he understands the high-profile superstars. I mean, he has charm, quiet voice, not the loudest person in the room, and he got Peyton an NFL Super Bowl, right? Peyton went on and got others. So sometimes the loudest in the room is not the smartest in the room, jumping up and down and complaining or doing whatever you do. I mean, you're coaching a generational player. It's not easy. Okay. And the best thing you can do is break the court down to four quarters. I can get a player to execute each one of these four quarters. That means if you're on and with each one of your minutes, these are the plays I need to see if you can make, right? I'm not saying you have to make the plays, but these are the plays. And I'm telling you, if you break this thing, the way I've always done it goes 4 by 4 by 4 by 4. What does that happen? You give me 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, 4 points. It's just a computing game of chess. But the player is getting into a realm that once they get it, because you're only the teacher. Okay, you're not the expert here. The player, this is what I got to go down when you talk about breaking that in and you want to know how to coach a generational point guard, right? You're only giving them information. You're not going to be able to process it for them. You're not going to be able to translate it for them, and you're not going to be able to apply it for them, right? In some games, when you get these type of players, right, because they've all grassroots players, everybody's played. You play in eighth grade. By the time you get to varsity in ninth grade, you're a starter on the varsity, right? We don't even play around with playing JV ball. We're going straight to varsity, straight to college. So when you get these top players, man, you got to know, okay, where's the clock ticking with them? And I can tell you where the clock ticks with Caden is being challenged. It's being challenged, challenged, challenged. Caden Clark, you missed 2 free throws. Give me 400. Every time you miss a free throw, Caden, it's 100 free throws, right? You got to keep that buzz going because at the end of the day, greatness, iron sharpens iron, right? You need this coach. So even going back, because everybody wants, I mean, it's for everybody's time, but you want to use Pat Riley and Paul Westhead. Paul Westhead was like Christie Sides, philosopher, right? Loves coaching, love, and back then I say the same thing. Paul Westhead was a great college coach, not a great pro coach, right? Everybody is not built for the pros. Okay. Athletes are under contract. They know you will be fired before they get fired, right? So you got to know that you cannot press the wrong buttons with a generational player because they're going to get you fired, right? LeBron James, you press the wrong button, he'd get you fired, right? He's got fired. LeBron has walked through so many coaches to the life of me. Now he's got a coach that he can sit down, have a glass of wine, and just discuss topics. Nothing about basketball. His basketball IQ is overloaded. Caitlin Clark's basketball IQ is already overloaded, right? So she just needs somebody to come in and challenge, but challenge to the mindset of saying, hey, you know what? Let me look at it. Let's see if we can get Lexi Hold 22 points tonight. Right? You got to challenge them like that. Let's see if we can get Boston 38 tonight. Right? You challenge that player to do things that nobody else has ever done. And believe you me, they're going to take it on, right? They're going to take it on. So when you get to doing that, and the player, you got to, that's how you do it with a generation. But then you get a number one pick, that goes even worse. So you're talking about a generational player that comes in at the what, 12th pick? Okay, that's different. You get one at the number one pick. This eyes are on this person and eyes are on you, right? So you don't have any open door meetings, right? You don't have any open door meetings where everybody can see you sitting down talk. Take them in the office. Come here, let me talk to you. Take them in the back, right? Because everything you do is under microscope. And I think that's what Christie Sides wasn't prepared for. Nobody's ever saw that in the WNBA, right? Nobody's ever saw that the Indiana Fever under the microscope. They're on television and they're doing their thing. So it is what it is. But you're talking about a generational player in Coach Hart. And you know what? It is what it is. So there you go. That's how you coach one. You gotta put them to the test, but don't press them. Don't try to coach them up and make them get into your philosophy because that's not what got them there, right? Okay, so then you got to coach a number one draft pick. Relax, but always put the pressure back on them. We're gonna win the WNBA championship. That's what Chrissy Side should have did at the press conference, right? There's no waiting 4 years, right? What does Kelly expect? She wants results now. Not tomorrow, not 4 years, not 3 years, now. Okay. And there isn't a 4 year plan to a championship, folks. Either you have it or you don't. And if you think you have it, you might as well start saying, we're going to win it. Okay. So your players can carry that burden for you, right? Rookie of the year. I mean, you get a generational talent, you let the media know, hey, you know what? My player's not only rookie of the year, that's the MVP. I don't care what any of you guys say. That's my MVP because the player is listening to every press conference you have. They're not going to bow out. Get somebody that's charismatic, that can have a good time, that can entertain the media. At the same time, if you get a coach that can entertain the media, that gives them less time to deal with your players, right? So you answer all those questions they want to ask players, so you take pressure off of the players. You don't want to be in the press conference, which I saw several times. Christie Side saying one thing, Caitlin Clark saying another thing. That's called a disconnect. And that happened way longer because Caitlin had to sit there and say, you got to be kidding me. What am I doing here? Why don't you guys get me a coach, right? So it happens, right? It's all part of the game, right? And you know what? Break down it into 4 quarters. Every 4 quarter, give me 4 assists in each quarter. That's 16 a game. Let's get me 4 rebounds as well. I mean, that's how you move the needle. There's no doubt about it. I take you back to the NBA champion Boston Celtics. This is an interesting story, right? Because you got Brad Stevens, okay, was a coach, but Brad is not coaching. They moved him up to the president. So when they moved Brad up to the president, I mean, he's a good coach, coached at Butler. But when they moved him on up there, you gotta look at that and say, well, what really happened, right? Because he was winning, but he couldn't win a championship. So, and you got to look at that and say to yourself, well, where did he go wrong, right? Where did he go wrong? And the whole thing about it is you just got to understand that winning is never easy. Winning is extremely hard, right? And when you get to it, you take the Boston Celtics. It's never easy. Okay, so when you talk about Missoula and what he's able to do, he came in translation. I mean, you talk about Joe. Joe's never been the head coach, just an assistant coach, but he had the translation and the connection to the players that he could actually talk to their people, tell them what they needed. They talk to the player. You hardly ever, in the NBA and especially in the WNBA, you hardly ever going to get right down there and start coaching a player. They already got somebody to do that. You got to find them, get the translations in there, and then they go work the player. You come back next game, now the player executes what you want. This is the Money Mike City Kitty Radio podcast. We're going to break that down. That's point guard college right there, folks. And it can go deeper and deeper. But generational talent, Caitlin Clark, why Christie Sides got fired, didn't know how to coach this type of play. All things are possible to those who believe. This is the Money Mike Syndicated Radio podcast, and shop till you drop with Fanatics Global. Nothing better, lots of gear, lots of good stuff. We'll see you soon.